Thank you so much for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. Today we're going to talk about how in the world do you show affection to an older child? Especially if you were not one of the people who joined me before you ever had children, or you joined me when your kids are, 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and you haven't been really affectionate with them, and you understand how desperately they need it, and you want to give it to them, but you don't know how you're going to do that because you can't suddenly start being huggy and kissy with them, or they're going to think you went all weird, especially if you have sons. How on earth can you share affection with an older child? And let's be truthful. If you have a foster child, or if you have adopted a child and you didn't start off with them, you can't be all huggy bear kissy face on them. That's going to be pretty questionable. And so you want to show affection to them. How can you do it? Okay, let me tell you. As I said to you previously, I worked in a private school for about 5 years. We had a very strict policy. You can't hug kids. I mean, no kids. And they weren't allowed to sit on your lap. Now, you could do what they would call a buddy hug. You could put your arm around their shoulder. And then you weren't supposed to do it for more than a few seconds at a time. Could I please tell you how that went with me? To the point that I literally said to my principal after a few weeks, I said, A, you should fire me, or B, you should acknowledge that that is not within the realm of possibility for me. Whichever one of those works for you, I'm okay with it. But you cannot walk up to me repeatedly and go, Miss Newby, you cannot do that. Miss Newby, you can't be hugging that child. It's just not going to be happening with me. And oh, when I taught K3 and K4, those kids sat on my lap during reading time. We literally had a rotation schedule. I understand what this is about. This is about liability. You don't want someone coming back and going, that was really sexually inappropriate. They don't have any business touching my child like that and raising a lot of questions. I really, really do understand the story. And you yourself, you better be careful with other people's children. Don't get yourself into trouble. Don't even give people a cause for doubt. But we're talking about your very own children and what that looks like. So let me help you with this. A, you can just put your hand on someone's shoulder. They're reading a book in a chair, and you walk up. You just gently lay your hand on their shoulder and lean over them so they know you're there and say, what are you reading? And is this an interesting story? You're literally showing affection really gently and quietly, kind of almost behind the scenes, I guess we'll say, not overtly, like walk up and grab them and hugging and kissing them, but they know physically that your presence is there and you're showing gentleness and something that does really nourish their soul. You're talking a 5 or 6 year old kid, you sit with them and you give them a certain amount of space. Again, especially if it's a foster child, an adoptive child, a child you're watching after, you give them space, 4 to 6 inches. Let them bridge the gap. They're going to let you know how much affection they need or even how much affection they feel comfortable with. And you don't have to put your arm around them. You can let them scoot up against you and lay their head on your arm or lay their head on your shoulder or grab onto your arm and lean over you. Let that child kind of establish the limits or the guidelines of what they feel good about affection wise. When you put a child to bed, especially a child who is not your own child, you could kneel down with them next to the bed and say prayers, or you can have them say their prayers in the bed and you kneel down with them. I very frequently will pray like this when I'm with friends, and that gives that child the opportunity to gently take a hold of your hand or not as they see it. And you can always ruffle their hair and bend down and just put a kiss on their forehead. There isn't anything sexual or inappropriate or questionable about that whatsoever, and yet it shows affection. Let me tell you something about teenagers. I remember the first time I shared this with a friend of mine, and she goes, that's what that was. especially teenage boys. They start to feel weird about hugging and kissing each other, even when they're brothers. So what they do is they tussle. They'll wrestle, they'll walk and elbow each other, kind of punch each other in the arm. Even in school, boys are making physical contact with each other, and it's often a lot rougher than we might want to see it or than we understand it. But those are all signs of affection between teenage boys. There's a long line between that than a kid walking up and slugging a kid. I'm just talking normal, wrestly, tussly, push and pull. All of that is physical affection between boys. Girls, and tragically, our culture has gotten a little weird about this with sexual confusion, but normal girls, girls who are comfortable with themselves, they'll put their arms around each other or they'll walk arm in arm. Sometimes you'll see them, touch each other, move each other's hair. They want to do each other's makeup or nails. All of those things are physical affection without overtly showing it. Do you know why it's really important to have physical affection with your teenagers? Because they need it so desperately. If they are not getting it from you, they're going to get it somewhere. I would like you to really get that in your head. Dad, you need to hold your teenage daughter's hand. You need to have your teenage daughter take your arm. You need to hug your teenage daughter. And I'm going to acknowledge to you, there are a lot of dads in the world. Their daughters begin developing a womanly body, and that dad freaks right out. And he doesn't have anything more to do with his daughter. What a tragedy. Deal with your own stuff. Love your wife fully and often. And show affection to your daughter. Hug her, kiss her on the forehead. Really let her know how important she is to you. And she will not have such a high likelihood of acting sexually inappropriately because she's desperate for affection. Mamas, you need to hug and kiss your kids. I don't care how much they do the whole, "Oh, Mom, that is so disgusting. Don't kiss me anymore." Let me tell you about my sons again. I had to work on this. I was not raised in a family where people were hugged, not even little kids, much less kissed, much of anything else. So my boys, as they grew up, every single day, everywhere we went, I held their hands. I would put my arms around them. When we read together, they were right up against me. Like sometimes it was hard to hold the book. They were so much right up against me. They really understood affection. So, when my kids were 11, 12, 13 years old, they still hugged and kissed me every single morning and every single night, and sometimes in the middle. I had a friend, and she had been sexually molested by her daddy. And I understood that so fully when she said to me, "You have no business hugging and kissing your boys. That's very inappropriate and not normal." And I said to her, "I understand because of your background, why you think that way, where you're coming from, and I'm really sorry with your discomfort level. But I'm not going to stop holding my kids' hands or putting my arm around them. I'll encourage them like not to hug or kiss me too much in front of you because you're very uncomfortable with that. But I assure you there is nothing abnormal and nothing inappropriate going on at my house. And I am not going to discourage appropriate affection with my sons." Today, my sons are 46 and 47 years old. Do you know every single time that we are together, if we go to the movies, if we're going shopping together, if we're at the mall, if we're out going to the playground with the kids, my sons still hold my hand. When I'm with them, every morning and every night, my sons still hug and kiss me. I don't have to do it. They hug and kiss me. I would really love to tell you what a treasure that is to my heart as a mom. My sons are not inappropriate, but they love me. They don't have any reservations about showing affection to me. If you don't get to hug and kiss your mom or your dad and you are an adult, let me tell you a story. As a teenager, my mom left us kids and we were with my dad. So every evening I would sit at the end of the couch and talk to my dad for like 15 or 20 minutes about what went on in the day and what was going on in the house because I had the responsibility for the house and my brothers and my sister. And I started at about 14 years old. I would go to the rocking chair where my dad sat. I would just kiss my dad right here on his face. And after I did that for a number of months, one day I leaned back and looked at him, probably from a distance of about 12, 14 inches. I said, "I really love you, Daddy." I thought my father was going to faint and come off the chair. I'm not joking. He did not know what to do, and it was so awkward for him. Remember, I'm a Christian. I was a Christian then too. It was an appropriate thing for me to show love to someone I loved as much as I loved my dad. I'm talking for years. I would kiss my dad goodnight, and not every night, but sometimes tell him I loved him. When I was a young married woman, and I lived in Tennessee, and my daddy lived in Michigan, and we went there, I hugged my dad. I really hugged my dad and told my dad how good it was to see him. And my dad was like this. He did not hug me back. When I left his house, I hugged him and I kissed him on his cheek and told him that I loved him. The next time we went back, maybe 3 or 4 months later, my dad hugged me. And somewhere in my early 20s, my dad learned to say to me, "I love you." My father died when I was 32 years old. One of my brothers said to me that he thinks the greatest gift I ever gave our family was that my dad learned to say, "I love you." And he said it to every single one of us before he died. I just want to encourage you. Love your kids and show it to them with simple affection, because you don't know when you might be gone or they might be gone. And every day they will remember that you loved them and you told them and you showed them. Today, my challenge for you is, how am I doing at showing affection, appropriate affection to my child? And then find new ways to do it more often, in appropriate ways, and in ways that translate into deep love to your child's heart. It's been great having you with me today. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.